Welcome to the Bible Conversation Podcast with Chris, Dan, and Dylan. Let's have a conversation. Welcome to another episode of Bible Conversations. Today we're going to be talking about stewardship. And stewardship is something that the Bible talks about quite a bit. The Bible actually talks about money more than most things. And I think that the part of the reason is that we are not great with our money a lot of times. And the scriptures, the apostles, and God all want us to utilize and use our money in such a way that is beneficial to others. So before we jump in, did Dylan or Dan, did y'all have anything that y'all wanted to say?
No, just excited to record another episode with y'all. We are getting towards the end of the year, right in the middle of the holiday season, and we're basically wrapping up the first year that we've been together running this podcast, and it's just an exciting time.
Yeah, exactly. And too, as we start getting into stewardship, I was just gonna say, with stewardship, we're talking about. You already mentioned it, but managing the household and the affairs of the home, and this is not just an issue that involves the dad of the home or or the mom of a home, or delegating what we have and what we've been given. It involves really all kinds of aspects. So maybe it's at work or maybe it's in school. You have to be a steward of everything because everything you have comes from God, and so you have to be a good steward. You're called upon to be a good steward. If you have anything at all, you have to be a good steward of it.
Steward just implies ownership of and or the authority over. And so, as we talk about it, I think today we're going to focus mainly on money. But if you have the time, you can go back to I believe it was our episode on giving, where we talked about the different things that we can give, the different things that we have. And if we have those things, we are stewards over them.
Yep.
So this right now, what you're listening to, is about a week after Black Friday, the official day. We are about a week past it, and all of the deals have come and gone. All of the Cyber Monday is come and gone. They've been.
See, I like Cyber Monday more than I like Black Friday because then I can stay at home, shop online.
and there's been deals throughout really this entire month throughout the entire month of November. And what I kind of want to talk about in regards to this, and in light of Black Friday and Cyber Monday and all these deals, is how are we utilizing the money that we've been given? Are we using our money in order to glorify the kingdom of God? Are we using our money to purchase things that we don't need? Are we using the money that is needed for bills, needed for necessities, for things we don't need? Obviously we're going to have some of us will have some extra spending money, right? Some extra cash. We've given to God what is in our hearts, our desire to give. We've saved some, maybe we've invested some, maybe it's and so maybe we've got some extra cash, we've got some extra money, and I don't believe there's anything wrong with spending that, right? But we got to make sure that we take care of the essentials first. And I think the first thing that we have to take care of is what is God's. And so if you guys would, let's flip over to Mark chapter 12. Mark chapter 12, verses 41 through 44. And this is Jesus here, as we're gonna find out. It says, "And he," being Jesus, right, "sat down opposite the treasury and watched the people putting money into the offering box." Now that's an interesting. I don't know if you guys have ever thought about it, but that's kind of an interesting little thing there, right? Like Jesus just goes basically into where the temple is, right? And he just sits down opposite the treasury, and he just watches. He's just people watching. It's one of my favorite things to do. But Jesus is just sitting there watching these people put money in, right? And I'm assuming he's aware of how much they're putting in. But
he's at the mall. He's at the mall just.
He's just watching, right? He's just watching, seeing what people are actually
shopping.
Seeing what people are actually spending their money on, and how much and what they're giving to God. Many rich people put in large sums. Well, that's good, right? That's really good. And a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, 2 mites, some of the other versions say, or some translations say, which make a penny. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, Truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the offering box. For they all contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty has put in everything she had, all she had to live on. So one thing that we don't see, and this was brought up to me, I think, by Corey, who we've had on here a couple times, and remember him saying in a sermon at one point, I think, that we don't know what happens to this widow afterwards, but we assume that she was taken care of. Mm-hmm. We assume that God did not allow her to perish, right? We assume that she was fed, that she was clothed, that she had lodging, and I think that's reassuring to me, Yeah. And so anyway, I kind of want to get y'all's thoughts on this. I've talked a little bit now, so I want to get y'all's thoughts.
Well, I always like looking at the Greek language and seeing some of the meaning behind each of these words, and especially when it comes to money, to sums of money, amounts of money, and what it refers to here in verse 42, 2 small copper coins which make a penny. In the Greek language, that is 2 lepta, which make, those are the 2 small copper coins, which make a kondrates, which I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that kondrates is a Roman copper coin. The Jews are under Roman rule right now. And that Roman copper coin, which those 2 smaller coins that she put in, is worth this 1 Roman copper coin. And that coin is worth about 1/64 of a denarii. Mm-hmm. And a denarii in this time is a day's wage. And so, you work for a day, you make, a certain amount of money. The amount that this lady put in is 1/64 of what you could make working for a day. And that was all she had.
So if you make $64 in a day, she's putting in $1.
Exactly.
That's all that she had.
Yeah, and that's all that she had.
Yeah.
So I just think it's really, really cool when you can see things like this. And this isn't just a parable that Jesus is telling. This is real life.
Yeah. So sitting down and watching it happen.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's kind of ironic because we're talking about stewardship, and some might look at this and say, well, wait a minute. She's giving away everything she has. Yeah. How is she a good steward? What might you guys say to that?
Going back to kind of what I said right before is that we got to take care of the things that come first.
Yeah.
Which is we got to give back to God what is God's. Mm-hmm. And God has blessed us so abundantly. He really has. And when we choose, and it really is a choice, when we choose to give to God or not to give to God, we're making a choice to put our priorities, where we believe they should be. Jesus talks about having food, right? And that he doesn't need bread, right? He's got food from his Father that we don't know anything about, and yes, we need food to survive, but we also know that we seek first the kingdom of God, and all of these things will be added unto us.
Exactly what I was going to say with that. Seek first the kingdom of God. One of the things that is quickly becoming, I don't know if you call it a catchphrase for me, but one of my favorite sayings is that as Christians, we live in a win-win situation. Because if we live for Christ, and if we die, that's a gain because we get to be in the presence of Christ, and that's the words of Paul right there. But in order to be in that situation, in order to live in that win-win situation, we have to be seeking first the kingdom of heaven, which means that we're not going to be holding on to money, being a good steward of it, of course, and not going out and throwing it away, but instead giving it back to God, taking care of that need first. That's how you focus on the kingdom of heaven. That's how you can live in a win-win situation, because the world does not matter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking about, in Haggai, the prophet Haggai, we a lot of times we forget about the context of these prophets and everything. But one thing I do remember is Haggai is kind of like about I think it's the post-exile, and they're sort of back in the land now, but they're supposed to be focused on rebuilding the temple, the temple. And yet, they're not really putting first things first, and so Haggai says, is it time for you to dwell in your paneled houses and this temple lie in ruins? And then he goes on and he says, you have sown much, but you bring in little. You eat, but you don't have enough. You drink, but you're not filled. And then my favorite is when he says, he who earns wages to put into a bag of holes. I like to think of the pocket. You got like a pocket where you put your money in it. There's a hole in it. The change just keeps falling out. Why? Because you're not putting first things first. And that's the, the widow and the mite, she believed that God was, she put first things first, and she believed God would take care of.
Yeah, the phrase my dad always used whenever I got money from a birthday or something and wanted to go out and buy baseball cards immediately was, is that money burning a hole in your pocket?
Exactly.
And we see here, right, going back to this little story, right, the widow put in all that she had, and Jesus said that she gave more. But Jesus does not condemn those who gave out of their abundance. He does not. And we see in the New Testament, we are to give out of abundance, right? I know one of you guys probably know that passage that I'm talking about. But we're to give out of the abundance of our hearts. We're to share what we have gained. And so nobody in this story is really frowned upon or condemned or looked down upon, right? It's just that one is elevated. And so as we think about how we spend our money, right? We have to give to God first, right? That has to be a priority in our minds. And not just a priority, but the priority. And after that, yes, we can take care of ourselves. And sometimes giving to God is going to be giving to others. Right? I firmly believe that. I firmly believe that taking care of missionaries, right? Taking care of maybe you've adopted a family that you went on a mission trip, or people who have, and you've adopted a family or a group of people, and you're trying to get them through school, or you're trying to provide housing, or whatever the case may be, right? To me, that's serving God with your money. That is good stewardship. Going gambling, right? Doing things such of that nature, that is not good stewardship. It's potentially very wasteful.
Yeah.
Yes, you can potentially earn a lot, but you could also lose a whole lot and gain nothing.
That's right, and that's a whole nother podcast, isn't it? I mean, that's with a lot of serious issues with that. And I was thinking too, Chris, what you said is spot on about the heart, because it's sometimes when you read the Gospels and you try to put things in their part, why is this here? Why is that there? That's always an interesting question. I think it's good to interpret the Bible. When you're interpreting the Bible, ask yourself, why is this here? Why is that there? Because the Gospels especially, they all have different parts, and they kind of put things in different sections. And anyway, not to get into all that, but I did kind of wonder before one time, why is this here? Because it almost seems just like you're reading through Mark, and it's like, why all of a sudden is there this widow? And I think it has a lot to do with right before, when he says, beware of the scribes, Jesus says, beware of the scribes in verse 38. And then he talks, they love the greetings and the best seats and devour widows' houses, and for a pretense, make long prayers. And so they're not doing this with the heart, and that's the problem. Like you said, it has to be done of the heart. That's really the beginning of good stewardship, is your heart. Yes. Your wantingness and your willingness to serve God, and that's really what Paul talked about in 2 Corinthians 8, that famous chapter there that talks about giving and having a willing heart. That's where it starts. Paul was saying that they have to have this willing mind. They have to want to do it. He knew that the church at Corinth, there wasn't any way to really get into their pockets unless their heart was willing to be shaped.
And that's the verse I was referring to with the abundance, right? Giving in abundance. 2 Corinthians 8, 13, right? For I do not mean that others should be eased and you burdened, but that as a matter of fairness, your abundance at the present time should supply their need, so that their abundance may supply your need, right? So our abundance should be given so that others don't suffer. It should not be kept in storehouses so that we have to build a bigger barn in order to keep all of our wealth and our food, because we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. We don't know whether we're going to be here tomorrow or not.
Yep. Speaking of the heart and how this is, I think you used the phrase, Dan, that this is a heart issue. That's
not a Dave Ramsey issue.
No, that makes me think. It's more than just money. It's being a good steward is more than just, taking care of your finances. And you referenced at the beginning, Chris, that, stewardship, that's just a term for ownership, whatever you take ownership of. And one of the biggest things that we should take ownership of and that we should want to take ownership of is the message of Christ. And to be a good steward of that is to pass that along. To be a good steward of that is to share Christ with everyone. I don't know if y'all have some thoughts in regards to this, but I think stewardship is so much more than just taking care of the finances you've been blessed with.
I think, when you look at the qualifications for elders, for deacons, right, if we are to aspire to that office, then we need to raise up our children in the admonition of the Lord, right? We're to be good stewards.
That's being a good steward.
Being good stewards of what we've been given, right? Good stewards of the house, good stewards of the finances that we have. Yep. We're not going to want to hire a leader to talk about our finances as a church who's bankrupt and broke and in debt, right? Like that's we don't want that. We want someone who is financially stable and who knows how to manage money, who knows how to do these things, so that we know that what we give to the church, right, is what we're giving to God, is going to be well provided and taken care of. And so, I agree wholeheartedly. We have been given the gospel. We've been given the gospel. And if we choose to keep that, right, to bury that, like, we talked about the talents a couple of weeks ago, right? We choose to bury that instead of using it. Well, we're not being good stewards. Right? We're supposed to use our money. We're supposed to use our talents. We're supposed to use the gospel. And I think that's a part of stewardship. We're not supposed to, you talked about baseball cards a bit ago, right? Yeah. Think of a first edition Nolan Ryan baseball card, right? People want to keep that in near mint condition, right? You want to wrap it up, make sure it doesn't get touched, right? You don't want any grubby hands or fingerprints on it. You want to protect that card.
Yeah, take care of it. Be a good steward of it.
But the gospel, we want it to touch everybody.
Yeah.
And so we've got to look at the things that we have, the things that we own, and determine whether or not we are to use them, to protect them, to save them, to hold them. And I think that's where we become and learn how to be good stewards, is when we look at the individual things we have and adjust how we use them and how do we utilize them accordingly.
Yep.
Yeah, spot on. And I think part of what we're saying then is recognizing the intrinsic worth, of the things that we have. Gospel number one, that's number one. And then how do the things that we have best serve that desire, that need, that duty to preach the gospel and share it with others? How do the things in our life serve that ministry of the gospel? That's kind of putting things in priority. Gospel number one. And then everything else helping to serve that ministry of the gospel. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of things that we can talk about as far as being a good steward of. But Dan, what Dan just summarized there, gospel number one.
Yeah.
That's some heavy language, especially when sometimes we don't make the gospel number one. All of a sudden, it's a self-reflecting time. Oh man, am I being a good steward of the gospel of Christ, the good news about Christ? But anyways.
Yeah. Well, do you guys have anything? Otherwise, I'll wrap this up real quick.
Put a bow on it, man.
Put a bow on it. We have officially brought that back a couple weeks running now. So, putting the gospel first, I think, is huge. And Dylan, you just said, something that I was thinking as well. We could probably sit here and talk for hours about various different things that we can be stewards of. But at the end of the line, we've got to understand that stewardship, again, is just ownership of something. And if we are choosing to own something, right, because that is a choice. Right? We choose to own a car. We choose to own a house. We choose to own things, right?
When you choose to follow Christ, you choose to own his message.
Yeah. And so we make that choice. Right? We choose to own these things. And if we do that, then we've got to take stock. What Dan was saying, we've got to take stock of the relative value of those things and place them in sequential order. And if the gospel does not come first, I think there needs to be a reprioritization of your life. And so I hope that this discussion on how we manage the things that we own, right? How we are stewards, whether we're good or bad stewards, has been helpful. And I hope that that the listeners, that you guys, you can take this and reflect on whether you are a good steward, because that's what we're called to be. We're called to be good stewards. So we love you guys. We appreciate you. We are grateful for you, and we hope that, as Dylan mentioned earlier, we're entering in on close to a year of this podcast. We hope and we pray that we've been good stewards of this podcast, and that it has been beneficial to you. And we would love to continue doing this. And if you would like to help out in any way, please listen here in just a couple of seconds as to how you can do that. Thank you so much for listening to the Bible Conversations podcast. I want to tell you about a couple of ways in which you can be involved or help us out. You can like us on Facebook and share our posts. You can send us an email at kcocbibleconversations@gmail.com. You can follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can even leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We're also partnering with Ministry League. This is a wonderful app full of so many different resources to help you grow your faith. We love you all. Now let's go start a conversation.